Okay, 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 okay. I want to hear you sing. You like salsa, right? You like salsa. Okay.
It seems like her
So I
voice
have
has no
to
limits.
hear you
Jazz,
sing too.
American, Cuban, Brazilian music, in English or Spanish. This Cuban singer interprets everything with an exceptional touch. Needless to say that she's a tremendously popular singer in Cuba, and she has worked with some of the best musicians of this island. Luna Manzanares has every ingredient to be a star. Thank you so much, Luna, for this opportunity of being with us in Telesur.
Thank you, thank you.
It's a great pleasure. We really admire, and I think it's going to be very useful for the audience of Telesur in English to hear your story. Sure. You've had a very interesting academic training. You're extremely young, but so far it looks like, although you've studied a lot, at the same time you've worked. How important do you think is the academic training for a musician to be, or a singer to be, for example, the kind of musician you are today? How important is that academic training?
Well, I think it's really, I think it's principle. I think you need that training to do so many things in a short amount of time. I think also when you're trained this way, you sort of have this spectrum of possibilities and sounds in your head, which allows you to play kind of flirt with different genres. And I think also that you need tools. You need tools to do things fastly and understand kinds of music really fast. And also, it's a very, I couldn't say easy, but it's easier to see music from this spot, you know. If you have tools, if you know, well, if you play the piano, or if you know musical history, I think it makes it everything. It makes it easier.
You started since very young in your life to be a singer. When did you realize that that was not a hobby or something that you were just doing as a play, as a game? When did you decide that that was what you wanted to do, and why?
Well, I think my mom and my dad are artists, so I kind of always knew when I was really little, I knew that I was going to be an artist. Although I wanted to be a painter at first, but
Do you have the skills for that?
Yeah, well, I kind of doubt that I still have them, but I used to. I have to try some of these days. But I took it very seriously when I was about 6. My grandmother used to play the guitar and sing very beautifully, and my mom and dad also. My mom still sings. My dad died, so he used to sing. But he really loved music. We all loved music. But I decided to become a musician when my father died. I remember we were in the living room just watching a musical show that called De La Gran Escena. We still have it. We are still that lucky. And my mom was watching, looking at this girl playing the cello, and she said to me, like really, I think she wasn't really thinking about it. She said, "Wow, your dad would have loved you to be a cello player," and for me that was like an order. Later on, I said to her, "Mom, I want to go to music school. I want to try this." And she said, "Well, musicians have to be very disciplined. They have to study a lot. So you really have to be sure that this is what you want." And then I said, "No, this is what I want. I really want to go to music school." I wasn't really convinced that I wanted to play the cello, but I wanted to be a musician. Unfortunately, I wasn't ready enough, or perhaps deep inside I knew that maybe not taking the right instrument, and I didn't. It didn't turn out well that try. But 2 years later, when we moved, I met a girl. She plays the violin, and she's one of my best friends nowadays. And I said to my mom, I want to try it again. She said, are you sure for this time? Are you sure? Are you really sure this time? And I said, no, I want to be a singer. I always sang when I was a kid, but I had it really, really clear when I was about 8.
You, we've seen you grown in this last years, and I wonder, I mean, Cuba has an advantage, which a phenomenon that could be seen as an advantage or a disadvantage. It depends on the point of view, which is that we're not that influenced or determined by the, let's say, the most wild market around music. So that if you are 12 years old in other geography and you're discovered, you have a bunch of producers around you, created conditions to create a star, which could be good or not. Exactly. But there's a lot of middling of these structures of market. Sure. We don't have that. That's good in one side, but it's also in some point makes hard the fact that you are going to be a singer on your own. You really need to be good. You really need to open the way for yourself.
That's true.
How has this process been for you? How hard? How easy? Who made it easier for you, or harder?
Or harder. Yeah, well, I think it's a good thing that we still don't have that kind of violence in the music industry. It is hard to become a singer, to have a voice of your own. But I think in this country, and I've always talked about this with other friends of mine, musicians as well. In this country, if you don't have a career, it's because you don't want. Because we don't have to pay this big amount of money to make a commercial or to pay a CD. Here we have labels that if you reach them, if you're good enough, they pay for your CDs and for your development as an artist. And I think, yeah, it might be bad in the way that you don't have this big platform in which everyone can listen to you and your music can be bought and distributed and whatever. But it also makes you be sincere with yourself and develop a real thinking in music, because it's not enough to have a pretty voice. Anyone can have a pretty voice, but I think the important thing is what you're saying with it. And you have a social impact, you have a social task to do with your art. We are like, we do the chronics of our history, of our time, and you have to do something about it. Your gift is given for one reason. And I think this country is good in that point of view. You can develop your own speech. You can find your authenticity, and that's a good thing also, because globally everybody's sounding very similar, very alike, and sometimes you can't tell who is this and who is that, and when do they come from? Where do they come from? In Cuba, we have a very special sound, and we still can use it, you know, as a label, as a brand. I am Cuban. This is how it sounds like, because when you have all this amount of people working with you, sometimes it turns out that you sound like everybody else. You're just a product. Here, you can be an artist, and that's a good thing.
When you read about your what you've done, you've worked with tremendously talented musicians in Cuba. Luckily, and I imagine, I mean, I haven't talked to any of them, but I imagine that for them it's like a treat to work with you, because I mean, I don't think that, for example, December Bueno will produce a CD just to anyone.
Definitely.
I think he would pick the person that he would spend the time with.
Sure, sure.
I believe when you read, it seems like your solo projection started precisely with the production of December Bueno and Tanta Soledad. And there are other many songs that we could play in this interview to give the audience the perspective of how diverse and versatile you are in English and in your music in general. How important has been the people that you've worked with? How much has impact on you?
Well, I think definitely everyone, all the musicians that I've had the luck to work with, they've all played a really important place in my development as an artist. You're right about December, and that's one of many that I've worked with. But I think you have to, in your growth, this path is really complicated when you have many possibilities. And to have these people to work with you is it's kind of, for me, it's kind of like, well, if this guy is trusting me, I have to do a good job. So it's separation for me. It's one step and then another in front of it. It has made me, every artist has made me grow a lot. And there are like ages or specific moments in my career that definitely have been like growing in a big spiral, ascending. I think it's been a really good thing.
I'll say, and you repeat. Very good. Once again. Once again. Once again, echo.
There's not a lot of musicians, at least not in Cuba, that decide to go into singing in other languages. And it seems like that's not an obstacle to you. You sing in several languages. And I was wondering when that became a thing to you, when that became a motivation to you, and why?
And why? Well, really, I started, when I started singing in other languages, I didn't really think about it. I think emotions are the common tongue among human race. So it doesn't matter in which language you sing. The important thing is what you're saying. And I, having this big universe, musical universe, has driven me to listen to different kinds of music, and I've wanted to reproduce them or maybe to play them. I've ran onto English, Portuguese, and I think there's a special way to compose in English and to compose in Portuguese or other languages, and it's all about the sound. You know, the sound is different, and it's interesting to me. But I didn't really think about, well, let me do something that nobody's doing right now. Let me sing in 7 languages. It just has become that way. I hadn't thought about it.
When you look up online in YouTube or Google, and you write down the spirit of the Beatles, you don't expect to find a bunch of Cuban young musicians to be doing homage to the Beatles. It's something very weird, you know.
Yeah,
it's really, is this happening? and then you open those videos, and it's great to listen to you. It's absolutely fabulous. But who came up with that idea?
Well, my dearest friend, Enrique Carballea, he's a really good producer and is a even bigger music lover. And I think we share this love for the Beatles. We've shared this love for the Beatles from so long, from the moment that, this moment that we met years and years ago. I was this little skinny girl, and I didn't even had the idea of how my voice really sounded when he found me. And actually, after I became kind of popular when I sang a soap opera song, after that we said like, well, we have to seize this moment. Something's gonna happen, but we need music. We need to do something. And the Beatles for me have always been part of my history, part of my own of my life, because I used to listen to them, as well as Nico Saquito or Maria Teresa Vera.
Cuban musicians.
Cuban musicians, exactly. They are part of my life. The soundtrack of many moments in my life. So we said we have to do something with the Beatles, and we started like to sing songs, and we kind of we built this project together. But it was his idea, for which I'm really glad and thankful.
I something very interesting in your career too is that it seems like you're not a follower of a predictable trend. I think that's something,
Definitely.
I think that's something admirable.
Thank you.
In you, because it's very easy to go with the trend.
Sure.
It's in a lot of cases it seems like success is right there waiting for you when you follow a trend.
Exactly.
But you've broken that in many ways.
Yeah.
And one of the things that makes you special,
Thank you.
is that you have not been afraid of relating yourself with messages, persons, people, political causes, which evidently you might feel you should feel a relation with. I'm talking about singing, for example, in a very deep and sensitive song to bring back 3 Cubans that were in jail in the United States fighting terrorism.
Yeah.
And it was a beautiful song dedicated to the American audience in English, just in English, about using all these symbols of the yellow ribbons.
Yeah. Beautiful.
And then, a beautiful song. And then, recently, you were one of the singers in a beautiful song to, which became a very, very important song in the moment in which Fidel Castro died.
Yeah.
The writer, the songwriter, Raúl Torres, wrote the song, and then some singers came along, and it's this beautiful piece of art, which is a soundtrack of millions of Cubans that were suffering and feeling the loss of this great leader. This is not, and this is might not something that the foreign audience may understand. For a Cuban musician to do that has a high cost.
Yeah, definitely.
And it means that you really not be afraid of that cost. What would be the main motivation to go to that path, even when this could mean questioning from international market around your person?
Yeah. Well, I thought, you know, what's important, and I've always have this very clear. What's important about being an artist is to have a personal voice and opinion, you know. And first of all, I believe in a human being and our emotions. I live in this country. I was born here, and I represent my country, my generation, and even generations to come, and other generations before me. So I do respect any kind of thinking, because people can have, definitely in Cuba, we have people with different politic opinion, you know, and it doesn't matter where you stand, it doesn't matter what you believe. I respect what everybody believes in. But I think I did what I have to do, because it is not my voice, it's every Cuban's voice. This song it isn't about what we think personally, it's about every Cuban and that moment, which meant a lot to Cuban people. So in this moment, I did not hesitate. I didn't even know what was going to happen when I got to the studio. But definitely, I wasn't thinking about me only. And as an artist, I think this is a position that sometimes we might, or maybe always, it could be good to have. We represent people, you know. And people have asked me, well, why did you do it? Maybe, well, it couldn't be good for your international projections. And I said, well, if they can't take me as I am, they can take my music. And I think what's good is good. And I sing, what I do is art. Sometimes art is about politics, because as we were saying, as artists, we make chronics of our society, and our society has a lot of aspects. Politics, I'm sorry, is one of them. And I don't think that this song is even about politics. It's about a leader, and it's about a great human being who did great things. Some people look at them in a good way, some people don't, and I respect that. But I think he is definitely, and I say is because he still is, a remarkable person. So I'm not afraid of what might cost me in the future, because if it had to do something with my career, with my personal development, an opinion or something, then it's not serious enough. They're not taking me serious enough. So it doesn't matter.
We are suffering a process which is not exclusively of Cuba, but is related with the fact that certain types of music are colonizing all the consumption habits in everywhere, in everywhere where we listen to music, either a car, either radio, either your colleague or your friend or your son or your father that listens to music, is kind of a process in which we are lacking of diversity in which kind of music is distributed, ergo the kind of music that we are listening. And it seems like you're not in music because of being popular or because of earning a lot of money very fast.
Definitely not.
Because it wouldn't be the path that you've chosen.
Exactly.
You've been in other paths, right?
Yeah.
What do you think of this process? Do you feel hopeful even in this context in which we are so listening to music, which I won't evaluate the quality, but definitely in any case is affecting how much different music we listen to, and is affecting the taste of the younger generations of how to pick music to listen. What's your intake on that? What do you think about this?
Well, it's a very interesting question. I was talking to young people, a bunch of young people younger than me, I mean, just yesterday, and we were talking about the context of music. This kind of music that we're talking about has always been there. It's about having, well, a spectrum of possibilities. They need to know, what people need to know is that you can have any preference. That's not bad, but you just can't. Well, you can do anything. But what I want to say, what I told them was, you can choose your music for a special moment, because also this big global phenomenon, we artists have to deal with it, because in one side you have the fact that if you don't go a little bit with what's going on, people won't listen to you, and you just don't exist. And in the other hand, you have the fact that this music can be well done, or you can. I believe in what Mahatma Gandhi said one day. You have to be the change that you want for the world. So what I think is that we as artists have to propose different ways to offer this music. For example, I was talking about trap yesterday with the kids. It's actually very popular. And I asked them, well, what do you think if I would say this kind of whatever piece of good lyrics in trap? well, it would sound good. Okay, then this is maybe a solution for trappers. But the sad thing about this is when you sell this kind of music, you sell also a style of life. And it all comes to what do you want? Do you want this kind of life for your kid or for your partner or for your friends? That's a complicated thing. It's not only the music. You sell a lot of things with that kind of music. And I think we have to try to approach these new trends with our own thinking. You know, try to make it even a little bit better if it was possible, and propose it to young people, because we can't ignore the fact that it's happening. And what is not healthy for me as an artist is that, well, I'm falling behind, and people just won't listen to me in a bunch of years. So it's you have to manage that. And this is a very interesting position. I try not to contaminate with this kind of music, but also in this, for example, in my new city, I'm trying to bring these sounds a little bit with my message and with my essence, but just to introduce new codes so that young people can consume it, and I am selling my ideas, and that's the way I want to reach them. Maybe we all should try to make like a marriage, a healthy marriage with the trend and with real thinking.
That's an interesting solution. And as a last question is related to that, for example, might be the marriage, but you're super young.
Thank you. You too.
Oh, thank you. But you've achieved so much, and you said that you think that artists have a social mission in a way.
Yeah.
What do you want to do?
I want this. I was talking about Gandhi, and I want this society that I live in. I want it to be, you know, healthy. I want all of us to live peacefully, and I want beauty. I want to bring beauty to my society. And what I want to do is be maybe not an example, but maybe just draw a path for people to follow of beauty, of good things in life, you know. In my songs, I always talk about love, about peace, about being a good citizen, about, you know, what I believe in. And I think my mission as an artist is to bring these beautiful things and thoughts to my environment, because that's what I want for me. It's what I want for my kids, and I think it would be a very interesting and beautiful world to live in.
Thank you so much, Luna. This has been a privilege.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.